agile enough to respond while ensuring prosperous, inclusive, and equal development. Please allow me to welcome the moderator of this last session, Professor Mari L. Kapangestu, co-chair of Indonesia National Committee for Pacific Economic Cooperation Council, to take her place on the stage.
Thank you very much. We're being agile here. While waiting for the minister to come, we would start the next session, which is the closing plenary session on wrapping up and way forward. So we've had 1.5 days of looking at what is this technology, what is its impact been, and now let's talk about what we should be doing about it, yeah, and what's the way forward. So we have our first keynote address, and then we will, after Sri Mulyani gives her address, we will continue with the panelists. So may I now invite James Ward, who is the CEO, I'm not going to be able to pronounce this, epistemology. I hope I pronounced that right. He is really an AI expert, and he will hopefully show us the way forward. You have the floor, James.
Thank you, Marie. I'll see, is my slide deck ready to go? Just waiting on the presentation. There we are, good. So, all right. Yeah, so first of all, thank you to my hosts, and also thank you, my fellow guests, for giving me the opportunity to present a perspective on the way forward. I was first in Indonesia about 30 years ago. And since that time, there's been an awful lot of change. But even that level of change is going to pale into insignificance compared to the amount of change that we're about to witness in the next decade. What I'd like to do in this session is to talk about what that change looks like. So we're going to get very specific about the content of that future. And we're also going to get specific about the kinds of mental changes, paradigm shifts that we as a community will need to make in order to be successful and achieve all of the bounty that this future promises. Of course, this fantastic future is made possible through the addition of artificial intelligence to the equation of learning how to better use our intelligence to learn and create new knowledge. So we're going to be looking at a number of paradigm changes, talk a little bit about the old, and then talk about the new. And the first place I'd like to start is to look at the relationship between our institutional policy-making functions and artificial intelligence, and just look at how the two relate. And here's the framework that I use to consider this question. So let's take a look at 3 different ways that we can think about knowledge. The first is to look at the idea of tradition. So tradition is the accumulated knowledge of our community. So it's all of our religious traditions, our social traditions, our body of knowledge that makes us who we are culturally and socially and as a nation and so forth. And this is very valuable knowledge that we want to pass on to our children, pass on to our industries and so forth. And this is the role education plays. And so we transfer knowledge into the education sector. But when we educate our children, we do that in the hope that they're going to learn, that they're going to create new knowledge. So we have this idea of knowledge creation as well. And so one of the very important questions is how, when this circle completes, how the new learning of our children feeds back into our tradition in a way that preserves what's best about it, but also enriches it. And so it's understanding this circle of change that really is going to bring value to our future. We can also think about knowledge transfer in the sense of how do traditionally policymakers deal with industry, and what's their framework, their mechanism for bringing new knowledge to industry in order to create Industry 4.0 and these other ideas that we've discussed today. And their job is made more difficult when the amount of change increases. So we've got artificial intelligence now. It's the new tool for knowledge creation. So it's not only our children using their minds to create our new knowledge, we've also got automated machines that are assisting with the new knowledge creation process. And this can have the effect of generating so much new knowledge that institutions can feel a little threatened by the amount of change that they're being asked to cope with. And so this is, I think, a feeling that permeates conferences like this one, where we have institutions that are hearing about all these new things and wondering, what do we do, where do we go, what's the right response? A response that I see all too often when institutions are put under stress is this one, where we say, well, this is too much change. We can't cope with unfettered technology, and so we must immediately move to regulate. This is a very common response. And so if we keep a lid on artificial intelligence, then we can control the rate of change to something that's more manageable. What I'd suggest is that this is not the right policy response, and it's not the kind of response that's going to lead Indonesia and other nations into a future where it can compete on the world stage. And so really what I want to dive into in this presentation is what is the right way forward if it's not that? And then how specifically does it translate into global policies and cooperation and governance and so on? So first, let's look at the first paradigm shift we're going to talk about is the economic paradigm. How do we change our paradigm, our way of thinking about the economy? And the first is to look at the way we look at the economy today. So most people, when they think about economies, they say, oh, we've got these sectors, there's natural resource sector, primary production, manufacturing and services. And so if we're going to become a knowledge economy, if we're going to improve, then we've got to become consumers of AI. And so for a lot of people, this is what they imagine when they think of the future. And this is a reasonable model, and it gets you out of the blocks, but it's not the future that I recommend you imagine, because it misses the most important point about artificial intelligence, which is its ability to create new knowledge. And so what I would say is the primary opportunity is the opportunity to become knowledge producers in this economy, not just knowledge consumers. And so let's not leave it to other nations, other companies, other technology providers to be the creators of new knowledge, where we take the position of consumer with the trade imbalance and so forth. Rather, let's become knowledge exporters, because we've developed the capability to be a knowledge producer and therefore a knowledge exporter. So that is the first challenge and first opportunity. And in this way, we can think of ourselves as being a unicorn economy and bring our goods to the world, our knowledge goods. So if we're going to do that, we have to understand what it means to be a unicorn economy, a knowledge economy. And for most people, they don't have a clear picture about what they need to do to become a knowledge economy. So let's have a look at that more carefully. And so the old paradigm, let's add AI to our existing economy. New paradigm, let's treat artificial intelligence as a new industry sector in its own right. So this is an important shift. And so to do that, we have to adopt a new knowledge paradigm. So let's drill down into the detail of this, because I think this is a very interesting example. So here's an example of some knowledge. And this will be a very familiar equation. So familiar, we feel like probably there's not anything new to learn about it. We want to increase our profits, so how do we do that? Well, we either raise revenue or we reduce costs. And either one of those is going to produce more profit. If we look more deeply, though, at the relationship between these variables, we can see there's another way to look at this apparently common knowledge, which is this. And so here we see that there are actually hidden relationships between these variables which aren't visible if we use the old formalism. And what we're specifically seeing here is the relationship between costs and revenue. And so when we look at this picture, we see that it's actually necessary to increase costs in order to increase revenue. Because we can't